You keep meeting the same soul in a different body, different name, different story, same wound. It always starts the same way, the spark, the pull, the sense of recognition. As if your heart whispers, "I've known you before." And maybe it has. Not because of destiny, but because pain recognizes pain. They come to you like a storm disguised as still water. At first, it feels electric, intoxicating. You see their hurt, their quiet sadness, the shadows they hide behind their laughter. And something in you aches to heal it. You tell yourself it's empathy. You call it connection. But it's not connection. It's chemistry built on wounds that rhyme. It's the echo of your own unhealed parts calling out to theirs. You don't fall for them because they're whole. You fall because their brokenness feels familiar. Because saving them feels like saving the version of you that once needed saving. You see their pain and think, "I can fix that." You see their silence and think, "If I love hard enough, they'll open up." But every time, it ends the same way. You given, they taken, and you wondering why you're the one left empty. You don't just attract broken people by chance. You attract them because you've built your worth around being the healer. You've learned to feel valuable only when someone needs you. You think being chosen by the wounded means you're strong, but it only proves how much of yourself you're still willing to lose. Because deep down, you're not just trying to heal them. You're trying to heal the part of you that was never rescued. The child who had to understand pain before love. The heart that learned connection through caretaking. The soul that mistook exhaustion for devotion. That's why the same story keeps replaying. Different faces, same ending. Because you're not breaking the pattern, you're nurturing it. You're feeding it every time you confuse empathy with obligation. Every time you ignore your intuition because you're afraid to be called cold. Every time you give someone more chances than they ever earned. The truth is harsh. You don't attract what you want. You attract what you are willing to tolerate. And as long as you keep romanticizing pain, you'll keep finding people who hand it to you beautifully wrapped in promises. It's not the world that's cruel. It's that you haven't learned yet that love isn't meant to cost you yourself. One day, the pattern breaks, not because they change, but because you finally do. Because you get tired of mistaking chaos for chemistry. Because you start craving peace more than passion. Because you stop trying to be the antidote to other people's poison. That's the day you stop chasing brokenness and start attracting balance. That's the day you realize you were never meant to save them. You were meant to save yourself. You call it love, but it feels like carrying a body that refuses to walk. You think you're helping them rise, but somewhere along the way, you forgot you're the one sinking. Their sadness became your silence. Their chaos became your heartbeat. Their pain, it started to live in your chest like it had a right to be there. You started adjusting your tone, your energy, your entire existence, just to keep their storms calm. You became a caretaker of their emotions, a shield against their outbursts, a quiet space for their darkness to rest. But what about you? Who carries you when you collapse under the weight of their wounds? You see? Empathy can turn into imprisonment when you start believing that their healing is your responsibility. You begin to apologize for things you didn't do. You begin to shrink so they can feel taller. You begin to love them so loudly, you forget how to hear your own voice. They call you understanding. They call you patient. They say, "No one gets me like you do." And it sounds like praise, doesn't it? But it's not. It's permission. Permission for them to stay broken. Because why would they change when your love keeps making their pain comfortable? That's the trap of the empath. Believing that compassion means endurance. Believing that loyalty means staying no matter how heavy it gets. But let me tell you something raw. You are not strong because you carry everyone's burdens. You are strong when you finally put them down. You are not kind when you destroy yourself to protect someone else. That's not kindness. That's martyrdom disguised as devotion. You were taught to think empathy is about absorbing pain. But real empathy is about understanding it, not owning it. You can witness someone suffering without making it your identity. You can hold space without losing yourself inside it. And the moment you stop trying to rescue people from themselves, something beautiful happens. You start feeling the weight lift from your shoulders. You start realizing that love doesn't mean suffering together. It means rising separately and meeting in strength. Because no matter how deeply you care, you cannot heal someone who doesn't want to heal. You cannot fill a heart that keeps leaking by choice. Their wounds are not your homework. Their pain is not your destiny. You were never meant to drown, trying to teach someone else how to swim. You were meant to walk away, dry, awake, and finally free enough to breathe your own air again. Every broken person you've tried to save wasn't just a stranger in pain. They were a reflection, a mirror, showing you the parts of yourself you still refuse to face. You think you're drawn to their wounds because you're compassionate. But what if it's because you recognize them? What if, deep down, you see your own unhealed story staring back at you? You've been the fixer because once, nobody fixed you. You've been the listener because once, nobody heard you. You've been the light for others because you've known what it's like to be lost in the dark, begging silently for someone, anyone, to see your pain. So you found purpose in becoming what you once needed. You made healing others your identity because it felt safer than admitting you were still bleeding too. But here's the truth that burns. You can't heal from your reflection by polishing someone else's mirror. You can't rebuild yourself through the rescue of another. You can't fix your inner child by mothering broken adults. Every time you chase the next damaged soul, you're trying to rewrite your own past. You're trying to save the version of yourself that never got saved. That's why you confuse chaos with love. Because chaos was there when love wasn't. Because you learned early that affection came with conditions, that peace felt like distance, that attention only arrived when someone needed you, not when they wanted you. So you kept giving, kept forgiving, kept trying to be enough for people who were never capable of receiving it. But that's not empathy. That's trauma wearing compassion's mask. That's your pain pretending to be purpose. The mirror is merciless, but it's honest. The people you attract are not here to complete you. They're here to reveal you. They are the test. And the lesson is this: when you finally stop mistaking pain for connection, you begin to see yourself clearly again. You start realizing that not everyone deserves your depth. That some people only enter your life to show you the limits of your old patterns. And once they do, you don't owe them forever. You owe yourself release. Because growth is not about loving harder. It's about loving smarter. It's about recognizing when your empathy is no longer love. It's self-neglect in disguise. So look into that mirror, not with shame, but with understanding. See what you've been searching for in others, and give it to yourself instead. That's how the healing begins, not when they finally change, but when you stop needing to find yourself in their brokenness. There comes a day when you wake up and your soul just whispers, enough. You can't explain it. You just know something inside you has finally cracked open. You stop romanticizing their pain. You stop excusing their behavior with words like, "They're just hurting." You stop believing that love means waiting for someone to meet you halfway when they never even started walking. You stop apologizing for the way your heart loves and start demanding that it's met with respect. That's the day you begin to see the truth. You weren't meant to carry the broken. You were meant to teach them what standing looks like. But here's the paradox. You can't teach someone to stand while you're on your knees. You can't be the example of healing when you're still bleeding to prove your worth. So you start doing something radical. You pull your energy back. You stop over-explaining, overthinking, over-giving. You stop showing up to every emotional emergency that isn't yours. You stop mistaking guilt for compassion. At first, it feels wrong, unnatural even, because your nervous system was trained to equate peace with boredom. You mistake stability for distance. You mistake quiet for loneliness. But give it time, because peace doesn't scream. It whispers. And when you finally listen, you realize how much noise you've been surviving. This is the shift. You stop asking, "Why do they treat me this way?" and start asking, "Why do I allow it?" Boundaries stop feeling cruel. Distance stops feeling like punishment. It starts to feel like clarity. You begin to understand that protecting your energy isn't selfish. It's sacred. That love without limits isn't love. It's addiction. That empathy without boundaries isn't compassion. It's self-destruction. And that realization hits hard, because for the first time, you see how much you've traded just to be understood, how often you've chosen to suffer just to be seen, how long you've mistaken attention for connection. But that's okay, because this is where everything begins to shift. From saving others to saving yourself. From absorbing pain to observing it. From carrying people to finally standing on your own 2 feet. You start realizing that the world doesn't fall apart when you stop fixing it. You realize that people reveal their true colors, not when you give them more, but when you finally give them nothing. And that's the moment your peace becomes non-negotiable. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally learned the difference between compassion and captivity. That's the day you stop chasing closure. You stop fighting for explanations. You stop bleeding for people who mistake your empathy for weakness. You stop, not because you don't feel anymore, but because you've evolved beyond needing to prove your heart. And that's where the shift becomes permanent. When love stops being something you lose yourself in and becomes something that grows from within you. There's a moment, quiet but fierce, when you finally remember who you were before the exhaustion, before you became the healer, before you built your worth around fixing people who broke themselves. It's the moment you stop whispering, "I'm tired," and start saying, "I'm done." Done with explaining your heart to people who only listen to their pain. Done with being the emotional anchor for souls that keep choosing the storm. Done mistaking loyalty for love and endurance for strength. Because there's a fire inside you, one that's been smothered under the ashes of guilt and empathy. You've kept it small to make others comfortable. You've dimmed your light so no one would call it arrogance. But that fire was never meant to be tamed. It's the same fire that once made you hopeful. The same spark that made you believe in people before they believed in themselves. It's not gone. It's waiting. Waiting for you to stop apologizing for outgrowing what drains you. You are not cold for setting boundaries. You are not selfish for choosing peace. You are not cruel for walking away from someone who refuses to rise. You are fire, not fuel. And the moment you remember that, everything changes. You stop shrinking to fit into broken dynamics. You stop begging to be understood by people who benefit from misunderstanding you. You stop asking for love that only arrives when you're falling apart. Because your worth doesn't live in who you save. It lives in who you become when you stop saving. And here's the truth you've avoided for too long. Some people aren't meant to walk with you into healing. Some are only meant to show you the parts of yourself you had to reclaim. They were never your forever. They were your mirror. And once you see your reflection clearly, you no longer need to hold the glass that cuts you. Let the fire return. Let it burn through every false story you've told yourself. That love must hurt, that peace must be earned, that your softness is a flaw. Your softness is not weakness. It's the birthplace of your strength. Your empathy is not your downfall. It's your compass. You just have to stop using it to guide others who refuse to move. And when you do, the fire doesn't just return. It transforms. It becomes focus. It becomes clarity. It becomes power. The kind of power that doesn't shout or chase. It simply stands, radiant, grounded, unbothered. You don't need to prove your heart anymore. You don't need to bleed for love anymore. You don't need to shrink to be seen anymore. Because once the fire returns, you finally understand. You were never meant to save the world. You were meant to ignite your own. There's a quiet power in reclaiming yourself. The kind that doesn't roar, doesn't beg, doesn't seek validation. It just is. It's the power that comes when you no longer confuse empathy with permission. When you finally stop explaining your worth to people who only listen when you're in pain. When you stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "Why do I keep handing my peace to those who haven't earned it?" That's when you begin to come home, to yourself. You start seeing how much of your energy was spent patching holes in ships that were never yours to steer. How often you mistook their sinking for your responsibility. How long you've tried to hold relationships together that only survived because you refused to let them fall apart. But healing doesn't mean holding. Sometimes healing means letting it collapse. Let it fall. Let it end. Let the silence echo. Because in that silence, something sacred happens. You hear your own voice again. The voice that used to whisper under the noise of other people's chaos. The voice that said, "You deserve to rest." The voice that said, "You don't have to earn love through suffering." You begin to honor that voice. You start saying no without guilt. You start saying yes without fear. You start choosing peace without needing permission. This is the reclamation. The return of your energy, your time, your attention, your boundaries. You start to notice that when you protect your light, the wrong people drift away. And that's not loss. That's alignment. You stop confusing rejection with failure. You stop chasing closure from people who can't even face their own reflection. You stop seeking love in places where you've only been tolerated. Because you finally realized, peace is not something you find in others. It's something you build within yourself, brick by brick, truth by truth, boundary by boundary. And as that peace grows, something beautiful happens. The world starts mirroring your wholeness instead of your wounds. You start attracting people who match your calm, not your chaos. People who respect your energy instead of consuming it. People who see your empathy as a strength, not an invitation to exploit it. This is what self-worth looks like in its truest form. Not loud, not defensive, not desperate. Just steady, centered, unshakable. You begin to understand that love isn't something you chase. It's something you become. And when you become it, You no longer need to lose yourself to feel connected. You can finally love with your whole heart, without handing it over as collateral. That's reclamation. Choosing yourself not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started believing that you are enough even when you're not saving anyone. There comes a moment when everything you once tolerated suddenly feels too heavy. The conversations that drain you, the apologies that mean nothing, the people who only reach for you when they're breaking. You look at all of it, and you just can't anymore. Not because you've gone numb, but because you've finally awakened. You see now that pain was never proof of love. That connection built on suffering was never real intimacy. It was trauma dressed as tenderness. You see now that being the healer doesn't make you whole. Being the rescuer doesn't make you loved. And being endlessly understanding doesn't make you respected. You spent years mistaking endurance for depth. You thought the longer you stayed, the more it meant. But love isn't measured by how much you survive for someone else. It's measured by how much of yourself you refuse to lose. The final truth is brutal but liberating. You can't save people from their own patterns. You can't rewrite someone's pain with your patience. You can't teach accountability to someone who worships victimhood. And that realization hurts. It shatters the illusion that love can fix everything. But it also sets you free. Because the moment you stop trying to be the cure, you become the mirror, the reflection that says, I will not break for you anymore. You start standing in your truth so firmly that chaos no longer finds comfort in you. You start walking in peace so fully that only those who respect your energy can reach you. This is where you transform from the empath who absorbs everything into the empath who chooses what deserves their attention. Because empathy without boundaries is self-destruction. But empathy with awareness, that's power. You are not broken for caring too deeply. You are not naive for seeing the good in people. But you are wiser now, wise enough to know that not everyone deserves access to your heart. You've learned that you can love and still walk away. You can forgive and still close the door. You can care and still choose silence. That's not coldness. That's evolution. And as you rise, you realize the most powerful love story was never about the people you tried to save. It's about you. You, learning to pour into yourself without guilt. You, protecting your light like it's sacred. You, letting your peace be the loudest energy in the room. Because you are no longer someone's savior. You are your own sanctuary. So walk forward, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Not with walls, but with wisdom. Not with fear, but with fire. The kind of fire that no longer burns to keep others warm, but burns to keep you alive. You've done enough saving. Now it's time to become whole, grounded, untouchable, free.